There are moments in life when fitting in feels safer than standing out, when staying quiet feels easier than speaking honestly, when belonging to a group feels more important than being true to yourself. But what if the very thing we're chasing, acceptance, connection, belonging, is the thing we lose the moment we abandon who we really are? In Braving the Wilderness, Brené Brown explores one of the most uncomfortable truths of modern life. True belonging doesn't come from blending in. It comes from having the courage to stand alone when necessary, to stay rooted in your values, even when it costs you approval. This book is not about withdrawing from a world. It's about learning how to show up fully, honestly, and bravely, especially when the world feels divided, loud, and unforgiving. This is a journey into what Brown calls the wilderness, a place of uncertainty, vulnerability, and courage. And paradoxically, it's also the place where true belonging begins. Chapter 1: Everywhere and Nowhere. Brené Brown begins braving the wilderness not with theory, but with fear. The fear that shows up whenever we risk saying something that might challenge people, disrupt norms, or make us unpopular. Brown admits that every time her research points toward uncomfortable truths, her first instinct is to question herself. Who am I to say this? What if I'm wrong? What if people turn against me? For a long time, she tried to manage this fear by imagining her critics while she worked. She filled her mind with the voices of people who might judge, dismiss, or attack her ideas. The logic seemed sound. If she could anticipate criticism and soften her message, she could avoid backlash. But the cost of this strategy was enormous. Her work became cautious and sanitized. Instead of telling the truth revealed by her data, she began offering versions of it that were safer, quieter, and more agreeable. Brown eventually realized that this was not integrity. It was self-betrayal. By trying to belong everywhere, she ended up belonging nowhere. Her voice lost its power because it was shaped by fear rather than courage. She then traces this struggle back to her childhood. From a very young age, Brown experienced repeated moments of not fitting in. Frequent moves uprooted her sense of stability. Differences in race, religion, and social class made her feel out of place wherever she went. Even when she desperately wanted to belong, she often found herself on the margins, watching other people connect while she stood outside. One of the most painful experiences came during adolescence, when she failed to make her high school drill team. What might appear trivial from the outside became a defining emotional wound. In that moment of rejection, compounded by silence and lack of comfort, Brown internalized a story. I don't belong here. Worse, I may not belong anywhere. She explains that when rejection is left unacknowledged, especially in childhood, it can shape the way we see ourselves for decades. We learn to armor up. We learn to fit in. We learn to trade authenticity for approval. And slowly, we lose touch with who we really are. Yet this chapter is not just about pain. It is about awakening. Brown begins to see that the problem was never her difference. The problem was the belief that belonging required sameness. This realization opens the door to a radical idea. True belonging might require standing alone rather than blending in. Chapter 2: The Quest for True Belonging. In Chapter 2, Brown turns to her research to redefine what belonging actually means. She draws a sharp distinction between fitting in and true belonging. Fitting in is a negotiation. It asks us to assess the room, adjust our behavior, and edit ourselves in exchange for acceptance. True belonging asks for none of that. Brown revisits her earlier definition of belonging as the innate human desire to be part of something larger than ourselves. While this definition still holds, she now sees that it is incomplete. Belonging is not something we earn from others. It is not granted by groups, institutions, or ideologies. True belonging begins internally. To belong to yourself means staying loyal to who you are, even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular. It means refusing to abandon your values, your voice, or your identity just to feel included. According to Brown's research, the depth of our belonging can never exceed the depth of our self-acceptance. This chapter also introduces a troubling reality. Many people today feels spiritually disconnected. Not in a religious sense, but in a deeply human one. People report feeling surrounded by us versus them cultures, where disagreement feels dangerous and authenticity feels risky. In these environments, fitting in becomes a survival strategy. Brown's data reveals that people want connection without losing their power or dignity. They want to belong without pretending. Yet the current culture of polarization makes this incredibly difficult. Fear replaces curiosity. Ideology replaces humanity. And the pressure to conform grows stronger. True belonging, Brown argues, is not passive. It is a daily practice that requires courage. It asks us to hold paradox, to be connected and independent, to be part of something while standing alone. This is not an easy path, but it is the only one that leads to real freedom. Chapter 3. High Lonesome, a Spiritual Crisis. To describe the emotional state of our world, Brown introduces the concept of high lonesome, a term rooted in bluegrass music. High lonesome songs carry deep sorrow, but they also create connection. They transform individual pain into shared experience. Brown believes our culture feels high lonesome today. We are more technologically connected than ever, yet more emotionally isolated. We sort ourselves into ideological camps, surround ourselves with people who think like us, and avoid those who challenge our worldview. Instead of sharing stories and listening with empathy, we shout across divides. We retreat into echo chambers where fear, outrage, and certainty replace curiosity and compassion. According to Brown's research, this disconnection has serious consequences: loneliness, cynicism, and loss of trust. She defines this moment as a collective spiritual crisis, the breakdown of our sense of shared humanity. When we stop seeing one another as complex, flawed, and worthy, we lose the foundation for belonging. Braving the wilderness means resisting this pull toward division. It means choosing to engage rather than withdraw, to listen rather than label, and to remain human in the face of difference. This courage is rare, but it is essential. Chapter 4. People are hard to hate close up. Move in. In this chapter, Brown explores one of the most practical truths of connection. It is much harder to hate people when you know them up close. Distance fuels judgment. Proximity fosters understanding. When we keep others at arm's length, it becomes easy to reduce them to stereotypes or ideologies. But when we move closer, when we listen to their stories and sit with their complexity, our certainty begins to crack. And in that crack, empathy grows. Brown is clear that moving in does not mean abandoning boundaries or tolerating harm. It means choosing curiosity over contempt. It means being willing to be uncomfortable in service of connection. True belonging, she argues, cannot exist without vulnerability. Staying distant may protect us from discomfort, but it also protects us from empathy, growth, and genuine connection. Moving in requires humility and courage, but is the only way back to our shared humanity. Chapter 5. Speak truth to bullshit. Be civil. In this chapter, Brené Brown confronts one of the most uncomfortable realities of our time. Silence often feels safer than honesty. In a world shaped by outrage, polarization, and fear of backlash, many people choose to stay quiet. Not because they lack opinions, but because they fear being attacked, misunderstood, or cast out. Brown argues that this silence is not neutrality. It is self-protection, and over time, it erodes both integrity and belonging. Speaking truth, however, does not mean attacking others or winning arguments. Brown makes a clear distinction between civility and politeness. Politeness is about keeping things pleasant, even if it requires avoidance or dishonesty. Civility, on the other hand, is about honoring human dignity while engaging in honest, sometimes difficult conversations. Civility allows disagreement without dehumanization. To speak truth to bullshit is to name what is false, harmful, or manipulative, without becoming cruel or self-righteous. It means refusing to participate in denial, spin, or moral disengagement. Brown emphasizes that courage is not about shouting the loudest. It's about standing firm in your values while remaining open to dialogue. This chapter also highlights the emotional cost of staying silent. When we swallow our truth to maintain peace, resentment builds. Over time, that resentment can harden into cynicism, disengagement, or explosive anger. True belonging cannot grow in these conditions. Belonging requires honesty, even when honesty creates discomfort. Brown reminds us that speaking truth will not always be rewarded. We may disappoint people. We may lose approval. But the alternative, abandoning ourselves, comes at a far greater cost. True belonging demands the courage to be seen and heard as we are, not as others want us to be. Chapter 6, Hold Hands. With strangers. In Chapter 6, Brown explores the paradox at the heart of true belonging. While it begins within us, it cannot survive in isolation. Humans are wired for connection. We need community, shared purpose, and collective care. Yet the challenge lies in how easily community can turn into conformity. Holding hands with strangers is Brown's metaphor for intentional connection across difference. It represents the willingness to engage with people outside our comfort zones, people with different backgrounds, beliefs, and experiences. This kind of connection is not about agreement. It is about recognizing shared humanity. Brown's research shows that people often retreat from difference because it feels threatening. Engaging across divides requires vulnerability. It requires listening without immediately defending or correcting. It requires showing up without guarantees of being understood or affirmed. True belonging does not ask us to dissolve our individuality into the group. Instead, it asks us to show up as ourselves while staying connected to others. Brown argues that the strongest communities are not built on sameness, but on mutual respect and trust. This chapter emphasizes that belonging is a practice, not a membership status. It is created through presence, generosity, and a willingness to stay in the conversation even when it becomes uncomfortable. Holding hands with strangers means choosing courage over comfort and connection over control. Chapter 7, Strong Back. Soft Front, Wild Heart. In the final chapter, Brown brings together the emotional and practical skills required to brave the wilderness of true belonging. She introduces a powerful framework that captures the balance we must learn to hold. A strong back represents grounded values and resilience. It is the ability to stand firm in what matters most, even when faced with criticism or rejection. A strong back allows us to say no, set boundaries, and remain rooted in integrity. A soft front represents openness, compassion, and vulnerability. It is the willingness to be affected by others, to listen deeply, and to stay emotionally present without armor. Softness is often mistaken for weakness, but Brown argues that it takes tremendous courage. A wild heart represents authenticity and bravery. It is a refusal to be tamed by fear or approval-seeking. A wild heart trusts intuition, honors creativity, and chooses courage even when the outcome is uncertain. Brown emphasizes that trust is essential to sustaining this balance. She revisits the braving framework: boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity, as both a measure of trusting others and trusting ourselves. Without self-trust, standing in the wilderness becomes impossible. True belonging, Brown concludes, is not passive or conditional. It is an active, daily commitment to show up fully, speak honestly, and remain open. The wilderness is not a place we pass through once. It is where we return again and again to remember who we are. Braving the wilderness is not about rejecting connection or isolating yourself from others. It is about choosing to belong to yourself first, so that any connection you build is rooted in truth rather than fear. Brené Brown reminds us that true belonging is not something the world grants us. It's something we claim by standing firmly in our values, even when we stand alone. When we stop hustling for approval and start showing up as we are, we don't lose belonging. We redefine it. And in a divided, noisy world, that courage to stay rooted, open, and human may be the bravest act of all.